No, we'll go ahead and get started and yeah, so yeah, we can, yep. All right, so I will call this meeting of the Public Safety Committee to order. All right, it is 7:30 a.m. Notice of this meeting was posted with all the proper requirements by the county clerk's office for attendance. Everybody is here except Supervisor Krebs, who is running slightly late. So he'll be here in a couple of minutes. And we will start out with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so our first item on the agenda today is the consent agenda. I need a motion to approve that.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, motion by Supervisor Toma, second by Supervisor Milliken. Questions or comments on the consent agenda at all? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And it passes unanimously. All right, then we will go on to our discussion item, and I will turn the floor over to Judge Muehlbauer in a second. A couple quick comments. Because Judge Muehlbauer is a sitting judge, he will probably not be able to comment on any specific case. So I encourage you to avoid asking about any specific case, even if it's already been decided. There could be an appeal and it could be sent back to us. So I will caution you about that. I will also mention that every conversation I've had with any of our judges or our district attorney, I've always learned a ton of information. So please be ready to ask lots of good questions. Have your listening ears ready, because I'm sure we're going to learn a whole ton today.
Oh,
With that, I'm going to turn it over to Judge
with
Muehlbauer.
that lead in, I've got a little bit of pressure on me. You're gonna learn a lot. Okay, well, we'll find out. Let me first introduce myself again. I'm Jim Muehlbauer. I'm one of the 4 Washington County Circuit Court judges, and I've been a judge for 15 years. So I've been here for a while, and before that, I was a lawyer for 27 years. And I encourage you not to do the math, but if you do, that means I've been in the legal business for 42 years. So it's been a while. And at this point, I'm the judge in the county with the most seniority. I think that's how I got elected to show up here this morning. Though I could have pawned it off on somebody else probably and gotten away with that too. You know, we do have 3 other very good judges, and they all have a lot of experience, but in terms of judging, it's kind of limited. We have 2 that are almost brand new, and we have Judge Giernoth, who's been there for about 2 years. And even though they're all doing a wonderful job, it's like any new job, there is a learning curve. Okay. And, you know, you hopefully get better over time and not worse, but, you know, and I'm sure that will be true. Okay. Now, I am here because, first of all, I got an email from Brad Stern asking if I'd be willing to come and talk about the shortage of attorneys and any effects that might have on backlog in the court system. And I said I would, and I'm prepared to do that, and I will. But then I was asked, well, how do you want to describe this on the agenda? And I thought that might be too narrow, because if we start talking about backlogs or shortages, it isn't one thing, okay? It's a bunch of stuff that can contribute to it. I mean, and I'll get to that. So on the agenda, I had them list the topic as the state of the courts, okay? Because that's broader. And then if you have other questions that go beyond simply, are we short of lawyers, and is there a backlog, we can talk about other stuff. So that's why the agenda says the state of the courts. I'm not trying to compare myself to the state of the union, the state of the state, or the state of Washington County, but I'm here on the courts, so okay, it's the state of the courts. Now, the initial topic was shortage of attorneys, and does that affect us in the court system and create a backlog? The very, very simple answer is yes. Okay. But it's much more complicated than that. And even for people to understand the state court system, and in particular Washington County, I think I need to give you a little more background first, okay? Because it's a question of what do we do? Well, as a general broad idea, what we do in the state court system is we enforce state laws. We don't enforce federal laws. For example, God forbid somebody have to file bankruptcy. Bankruptcy is a federal law. They got to go to Milwaukee, to the Eastern District, or Green Bay, or Madison. You know, we have nothing to do with those federal laws, but we do enforce all state laws, and sometimes there's overlap with federal laws as well. But, you know, in terms of actual day-to-day, I'm trying to give you some sense of this because it's going to lead in is, are there shortages of lawyers? Are there backlogs? But if you really understand what we do on an average day, it'll make more sense, okay? There are different ways to try to measure what we do. And there's all sorts of data and statistics. And I even have all the papers here. It's nice because, you know, I can ask people to help me, you know, get me this information, all that. So I've got all sorts of data. But if you look at it, it's kind of confusing because let me give you an example. If we look at just sheer number of cases in different categories, we have tons of traffic tickets, okay? But guess what? In the court system, traffic tickets take almost none of the court's time. Judges, I mean, if I spend a half hour a month on traffic tickets, that's a lot. And the reason for that is those get, a lot of them get negotiated out. People get a speeding ticket or something, and they want to save a couple points for the license or something. So they meet with the DA. They're not in the courtroom at all. And most of those cases go away. But I think, you know, for last year, Washington County had 4,395 traffic tickets. Okay. So if you look at that number, you'd think, well, the judges are, you know, if we're going to get backlogged and stuff, we're stuck with all those because there's a lot of them. Okay. And the answer is no. It has very, very little to do with the court system and what we actually do in the courtroom. Okay. So you can't just look at the you know, so those sort of broad numbers. It's not enough. But if you compare that to how many criminal cases we have, and again, I've got full years for 2021, 2022 is ongoing, okay? But we had 1,827 criminal cases in 2021. So you'd be tempted to look at just those numbers. There are a lot of other categories, you know, divorces, small claims, juveniles, all sorts of other stuff. But if you just look at the sheer numbers, you would think, boy, we're really busy in traffic court. And the answer is absolutely not. We spend almost no time, you know, dealing with traffic cases. Yes, we occasionally have somebody that really wants a trial on their speeding ticket or something, but it's rare. And what we're really doing and what seems to drive the entire system is criminal cases. Okay. And I don't mean to make light of all those other categories. Somebody's going through a divorce. Their divorce case is really important to them. And we do a lot of that work too. But we really are driven. The entire system is driven by criminal cases. And I've looked at the statistics. I've got graphs and all sorts of stuff and data, but I'll just give you the overview. The overview is there has been a gradual, steady increase in serious criminal cases being issued through the DA's office, okay? It's not dramatic. It's not going up, you know, like crazy that we can't handle it or anything. But, you know, in the years 2020, 2021, and 2022 now, for part year statistics, there is a steady increase in the number of serious felony criminal cases that are being issued and then have to be handled by the court system, okay? And again, if you look at this sort of broad overview, which I'm trying to give you first, because then you say, well, what about a shortage of lawyers? What about, is there a backlog? And again, there are many reasons, but what's driving the system is these serious criminal cases, and there are getting to be more, okay? Now I'll stop right there for a second because I'll give you some percentages in a minute, but you may say, well, why are there more serious criminal cases? I can't give you an absolute answer, but I do know anecdotally what we see in court. there's a lot of drug problems, okay? And drug problems cause people to possess drugs, to deal in drugs, to commit all sorts of crimes, to, everything from shoplifting at Walmart, not because they want the item, they want to fence the item or sell it or on eBay or something, I don't know, and get enough money for their next drug habit, their fix, okay? So I can tell you this, when I started as a judge in 2007, it was extremely rare for me as a judge to see a heroin case come into court. Matter of fact, it was so rare that and we used paper then, we have all computers now, everything's electronic, but you'd read the criminal complaint and you'd look at it, you'd say, oh my God, a heroin case, like that was really unusual. And it was, okay. Now, heroin, fentanyl, cocaine, you name it, those cases are around, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but almost all day, every day. We just have real serious problems. And I don't want to get off on the tangent of drug court and what we're trying to do. There's some really good efforts being made to deal with some of that stuff. But again, I'm going back to this very simple idea of what are we really doing? How do we spend our time in the court system? And it's primarily on serious criminal cases these days. It's not 100%, but depending on how you want to measure statistics, because you have to factor in not just the sheer numbers. Like I said, traffic tickets, we got a lot of them, but we take almost no time dealing with them because we don't have to. And as a priority, they're not as important as some of the real serious criminal cases. And you compare those to other areas, you'd think, well, we're doing traffic tickets a lot. We're not. We're mostly spending time in criminal court, and depending on how you want to try to measure it, which is not easy, because again, each judge has a slightly different caseload. We get cases assigned at random, and we end up with a mixture. But it's somewhere between 50% and 65% of our time is dealing with serious criminal cases. Again, it's hard to measure exactly because you'd have to have a time clock and you'd have to be in each judge's room and clicking and keeping track of it that way. But it's a huge chunk of our time. Okay, so that's like a long-winded introduction to talking about, is there a shortage of attorneys? Because you say, well, where will you need attorneys and why would you need them and why would there be a shortage? But of course, we all know this from grade school or high school civics. Somebody accused of a crime has the right under the Wisconsin and the United States Constitution to have an attorney. Okay, well, and if primarily that's what we're dealing with in the court system is serious criminal cases, not some minor one where a guy might try to handle his case on his own, those people have to have a lawyer. That's the Constitution, okay? And that's where there is a shortage of attorneys. And it's not one reason either. It's a variety of reasons. I can tell you, for example, we're talking Washington County now, okay? They have had a significant turnover in the public defender's office and their caseload. I asked them about this. Let me see if I can get the right numbers. The average public defender, a staff attorney in the public defender's office used to have a caseload about a year or two ago of about 275 cases that they were responsible for. And they were working pretty hard at 275 cases. They're now up to about 500 each in the last year or two. Okay. That's just them. Okay. And, they can't handle all the cases where somebody is entitled to a public defender attorney for a whole variety of reasons. One, there are way too many cases and they don't have enough lawyers to spread it out to where they could actually meet with people and handle their cases and doing a job that's ethical and, due diligence, look at everything, study, and figure out what to do. But also they have conflicts sometimes. You get two people arrested for the same sort of crime, whether it was shoplifting or a burglary, you got two or three guys go into a house or a business or something. Well, they can only represent one because in representing one, their job might be to try to convince the judge or the jury or somebody that, well, their guy wasn't involved, or if he was involved, his involvement was minimal because he was kind of a go-along guy, but didn't plan the whole thing. So in terms of how culpable that person is, it's less. But you can't do that and also represent another guy that you're pointing the finger at and say he's the mastermind. Okay. So they have conflicts where there are 2 or 3 people involved and they can only handle one of those people. They can't handle all 3. So what do they do when they have too many cases or when they have these ethical conflicts? They appoint those cases out. Okay. And so in terms of there being a shortage of attorneys, I said my simple answer earlier is yes, there is a shortage. Okay. And it's primarily in the serious criminal cases where there's a shortage, and it's due to a number of factors. Number one, public defender's office is getting more and more cases, and I'm not here to influence the state legislature and spend money, but if you want to know why there is a shortage, well, they have more cases in the same number of lawyers, and a matter of fact, they have a high turnover. And I got those statistics as well, because the public defender's office was nice enough to get that. They have a statewide person who can give me all the statistics. And and this is a statewide figure. This is not just Washington County, but it's also true in Washington County. They used to have a yearly turnover of about 10% of their public defender staff attorneys. In the last year or two, it's gone up to 20%. Okay, so it's doubled. And so that's an issue. They also have an issue with recruiting people to come and work in the public defender's office. And the starting salary for a lawyer starting in the public defender's office is $27 an hour. Okay. Now, for some people, that would sound like a good salary. For those making a lot less. But, if we all think about it, we know it. There are probably skilled factory workers that are making $27 an hour or $35 an hour. I did turn off my phone, at least I thought I did. And, but I'm going to try again. And maybe I'll completely turn it off. I had silenced it, but texts apparently come through even though I silenced it. Sorry. So again, they have trouble recruiting people sometimes, and they've had a couple people leave recently, and they have another one who's slated to leave next April. And so they have a high turnover. And I'm talking locally. They've had 2 people leave recently, and they have a third one, and they only have 4 or 5 lawyers. So, and again, there's this learning curve for anybody with a new job, whether it's a public defender or, somebody flipping burgers or anything. You got to learn the job. And so they're struggling, and they're having trouble recruiting people. They have 2 brand new people who just started, I think, both within the last month, because I see them in court. And they seem to be fine people. I'm sure they'll do good, but they're just starting out. So there's that issue in the public defender's office. More cases and higher turnover and difficulty in recruiting at $27 an hour as a starting pay. Now they might, if you have a lot of experience, you might start at a higher rate. I don't know their entire system and how that works. But, the other thing, and again, we're talking about, is there a shortage of attorneys? And I'm saying, yes, there is. And I'm saying it's primarily in the criminal law area because that's where there's this sort of, crime is a growth industry, I guess we could say. That's not a good thing to say. But there's more crime going on, and there are more cases being issued. And as I said already, there are more serious cases being issued. So the other thing about working in the public defender's office, and I don't mean to make light of this, but it's not the most desirable job in the world if you're a lawyer. Think about it. Okay. The people you have to deal with are sometimes not very nice. I mean, sometimes they are. Okay. But sometimes they're not. And they have high expectations. You're going to get me off. And sometimes those people don't consider their lawyer from the public defender to actually be a real lawyer. In court, I've heard the public defender referred to as the public pretender. Okay. I've also had people say, no, I don't want that public defender. I'm going to get me a real lawyer. okay? And again, imagine if you're the lawyer and you have to deal with that, and some of these people are not the nicest people you would ever run into. It's difficult. So they have a struggle, and that's the way it is. Now, as far as appointing, again, when they run out of the ability to handle all the cases, they appoint private attorneys to handle some of those cases where there are conflicts. They can't represent 2 or 3 guys involved in a burglary, or they just have a case overload because there's such a high demand. There's actually a shortage of private attorneys willing to take those cases. The pay for if you, as an attorney, take a private attorney, take a public defender appointment, it's $70 an hour. Now, for some lawyers working out of home, they can make that work. If you have an office and a secretary and pay rent or whatever, $70 an hour might be below your overhead. Okay. Just it's sort of a quirk, but what happened recently in Washington County is we had 2 lawyers that, and I won't name them, I don't want to embarrass anybody, but regularly took cases from the public defender's office. They both got hired by the Fond du Lac County DA's office, and they both left. So we had 2 lawyers that handled a lot of cases that just left. And we had another lawyer who took a lot of cases and was really good, guy out of Germantown, who got a cancer diagnosis and died in a very short period of time. So, and this has all happened within the last 3 months. Okay. And those were 3 of the local lawyers the public defender's office relied on heavily to take some of that overload and some of those conflicts and help. So they're struggling. And I did get some information from the public defender's office on this. And at any point in time, because of phone calls coming in or people in the jail that say they want the public defender, they have a backlog in just trying to find somebody to take the case. And there are people, I was told the other day, can't remember which day it was, but I got an email from the Gilliam Parham, the public defender's office, that, they had right now, and I think this is late last week, they had about 20 people looking for a public defender lawyer that they haven't been able to find somebody to take the case yet. And 10 of those people are locked up in the county jail. No lawyer, and they're stuck in the jail. For them, that's not a really good thing, obviously. And it's not good for the system either, since the Constitution says everybody's got the right to a lawyer. And they're working on it. And again, they just hired 2 new people. I think it's going to get a little better. But, part of that is related to public defender, indigent people who have a right to a lawyer but can't afford one. And how is that going to be handled? And what are we going to do? So in terms of there being a lawyer shortage, yes, there is. Yes, it's in the criminal area. And yes, it relates to people who can't afford a lawyer, but have the right to have a lawyer to help them with their case. Unless you have particular questions about that part of it, there's other things I wanted to mention in terms of what's going on in the court system and things that we're struggling with a bit from time to time. And we can come back if people have questions afterwards. But, there are other things going on in the world and in the court system that affect what we do and whether we, from time to time, have a backlog. I want to make this qualification. We do have a backlog in Washington County, but it is not anywhere near as bad as other counties. If you may have heard some of the nightmare stories about how far behind they are in Milwaukee County and Waukesha County, which are really big counties. I mean, I've heard some rumors, I don't have exact statistics on it, but I've been told Milwaukee County is 2 years behind. I mean, that's a backlog. We don't have that kind of backlog in Washington County, okay? And Waukesha County is substantially behind. Due to COVID and other things, they were behind before COVID, okay? But, they pretty much shut down their court systems with exception of a few critical things they had to do. I mean, if somebody's locked up in the jail, imagine, God forbid, that was one of us, you would want to at least be able to get in front of a judge to have bail set to see if there's some way you can get out of the jail if you're entitled to. And those sort of critical services were continued during the start of COVID, but a lot of the civil cases and everything were shut down. And I don't know, it's going to take them a long time to recover. It's not that bad in Washington County. So I don't want you to get the impression that the system is falling apart. We're fortunate that we don't have some of those bigger problems that other counties do. But, what are other reasons why there is a backlog? This is kind of a sore point with me, and I'm going to mention it. It's the State Laboratory of Hygiene in Madison, Wisconsin. Okay. Now, I've been in this business one way or another as a lawyer, a judge for 42 years. And there have always been complaints from prosecutors and judges is we want the test results back sooner. Whether it's a drunk driving case, they got a blood sample. Somebody up there's got to test it. I can't test it. I'm not qualified. And if I did, I couldn't test it anyways. It'd be a conflict. Okay. So, but that's not all they do, of course. They're dealing with DNA evidence, all this sort of CSI stuff and drug cases, where they got little samples of something that's a little powder, looks like it might be cocaine. It's a white powder. God forbid, it might be flour, who knows? Okay. So they have to test all those things. And again, as long as I can remember, there have always been gripes from prosecutors and from judges that it takes too long to get the test results because you charge somebody with a crime. Let's take a simple drunk driving case. Guy gets arrested. He's weaving all over the road, smells of alcohol. He probably is under the influence, but they got a test result. And they still do, incidentally, a few communities do toximeter machines where you just blow into it, but almost everybody's doing blood these days. That's unusual. But in Washington County, I think we got at least one community that's still using breath machines. Okay, so but most of them are using blood because it's more accurate, quite frankly, and but it takes longer to get. And on average, and this is current information, this week information, me being in court, seeing cases where people are accused of operating under the influence. Okay. They get charged up front. In Washington County, I should say, we have an expedited procedure, and we have insisted that the DA's office, if people get arrested for operating under the influence, get charged really quick. The reason we do that is those cases potentially can be very dangerous, and we don't want people running around that at least don't have a bail condition that they maintain absolute sobriety, that they not drink while their case is pending. They're presumed innocent, but that doesn't mean we can't put reasonable bail conditions on them. And it's universal that everybody that has a OWI under the influence case, whether it's alcohol or drugs, it has a condition of their bail, whether it's high bail or low bail, maintain absolute sobriety while your case is pending. Okay. So those cases are issued very quickly because was Judge Martin's, he's retired now in his 50s, but he took the lead on that because we were all concerned that it was taking too long to even get these cases charged and getting these people in the court. And in the meantime, there's no restrictions on their driving or anything they're doing. So we instituted a procedure where every Thursday, people who have been arrested for operating under the influence in the last week have to come to court on the next Thursday. And we have 3:30 in the afternoon, we have basically an OWI court, and those people get their bail set on them, and one of the conditions is absolute sobriety. Okay, so we get the cases into the system super quick because the judges have thought that was important. Okay, but the problem is, okay, It's now taking 3 or 4 months to get a test result on ethanol alcohol. And I know I see a frown there. Let me tell you the rest. Okay. But that's on alcohol. Okay. And I'm talking this week. I was in court and I'm asking them, do we have a test result yet? And the lawyers are coming in and the defendants coming in. And at least we can keep track of them a little bit because we see them back in court. And if they violated that condition of absolute sobriety, we'll find out about it if somebody reports it. And but we're in, and no, Judge, we don't have a test result. The Y had one this week. We were at 3 months, and they had been for a while getting us results within about 3 months. And no, Judge, this is the DA talking. I just talked with the state lab, and it's going to be another month. We should have the result within 4 months. Okay. Now, that's only a part of the story. It gets worse than that because of the drug issues we have these days. Not all operating under the influence cases are alcohol cases. There's a lot of them that are drug cases. And guess what? After they test for alcohol, which is taking apparently 4 months, if they then decide they also have to test for drugs, it's another 11 months. We're way over a year before we know for sure what we have with the case. Okay. If it's a drug case, if it's a strict alcohol case, but again, we got a lot of people, I hate to say it, and some people who don't see what the court system does every day are not aware of this, but we have a ton of cases with drugs in general, and a lot of cases where this is a common scenario. I'm not picking on Milwaukee or Milwaukee County, but where people who live or work in this county will drive down there to get their drugs, whether it's cocaine or heroin or meth or fentanyl or whatever. And as they're driving back, or as soon as they get back in their car and then they start driving, they take their drugs. So then they come back into the county, usually on Highway 41 or 45 or whatever. And, a lot of these, some of them are called in by other drivers, 911 calls, this guy's all over the road or whatever. So, but we're seeing a lot of operating under the influence of drug cases. And it's a good year or longer. But, you get a blood test result, you can't blow into a machine like an intoximeter to get a result for drugs. There is no such thing. Okay. It's got to be a blood test. Okay. And it's over a year. Well, those cases are charged immediately because the judge wants to see those people in court, wants to set bail, wants to have a condition that if they are out on bail, they maintain absolute sobriety. And then these cases are lingering in the system because we have no choice for at least 3 or 4 months. And if it's drugs, a good year before we have a test result, so that each lawyer, each side knows what they want to do. And how bad the case is, and other than the facts of how bad, if they were all over the road or not, or whatever. So if we want to talk about backlogs in the court system, there is an example of something that's very real. And I don't have the ability to get the state lab to do their work quicker. And I will say this again, as I said earlier, as long as I can remember, there have been prosecutors and judges complaining it's taking too long. We need our test results from the state lab. And it's not just on the driving cases, it's on everything. That's a common complaint forever, but it has gotten worse. And the delays have gotten worse. And anybody who sits in that room and listens to this or works on these cases knows. And we all just kind of roll our eyes and just, it's like, okay, I'll adjourn, and we don't, somebody has an accusation of operating under the influence of drugs. We don't say, well, we'll see in a year. No, we make them come back at least occasionally. We want to see the person that, are they clean and sober? Are they being able to show up for court? And we kind of want to monitor them a little bit. But that isn't helping us getting our cases done any quicker either. So does that, clog the system a little bit, and are there delays? Yeah. So that's one area. And I don't know that there's any easy way to fix it. I'm sure the state lab would tell you they have had a turnover of analysts. And I know they do, because I saw one young guy in my court about a month ago, and I looked over there. I wondered, geez, he's out of school. And he was actually really sharp and did a good job testifying. But I guess the older I get, people look younger, and I'm like, holy smokes, I never saw that guy before. Yeah, so they have those issues. They have people that had been there for years that retire, and there's turnover and all that sort of stuff. So that's is certainly a concern in the court system. Now, beyond that, there are other things that have caused delays, and I kind of hinted on one before. COVID. Again, did it cause a little bit of a delay and a problem in Washington County? Yes, it did. And do we have a little bit of a backlog because of that still that we're working through? Yes, but it's not horrible. We're not 2 years behind like some people tell me Milwaukee County is. But when it first hit and the Wisconsin Supreme Court issued an order saying we had to shut down until we came up with the correct safety procedures, they're our bosses, and it was only for a little while, because they required us, and this is the Wisconsin Supreme Court in an order saying, until you put together the proper safety procedures, you can't run court. You can't, so we immediately had to get all the things that facilities people from Washington County helped us with. We had to have plexiglass, we had to have hand sanitizer, we had to have face, coverings and all those things. Fortunately, we managed to get all that up and running really quick. And then we were able to start running again, but we were down for a little while, because we all had to scramble and figure that out. And then we had to have a plan, and it had to be in writing, and it had to be approved by the powers to be in Madison and elsewhere, that our plan in Washington County was satisfactory to them on what they felt we needed for safety. So COVID was a problem. Another problem that's kind of interesting that most people don't think about is the world has changed. There's all this electronic digital evidence, okay? And I mean everything from people committing crimes and texting back and forth to each other, or setting up drug deals on their cell phones and stuff, which when they get arrested, their phone gets seized, and then it has to be analyzed by the people who understand how to do that. Everything from text messages to squad videos to body cams and things like this. There's a lot of identity theft and stealing off the internet stuff. Yeah, like crazy. It just surprises me how much of that goes on. And hate even to mention it, but with the internet, there's more child porn and more access on the dark web and all those sort of things. Well, when you have that case as a prosecutor or as a law enforcement investigator, and you got all that digital evidence, first of all, you got to sort through it and investigate it and make sense out of it. And then somebody gets charged if there's a reason to charge them. But then the defense attorney gets involved, and it's part of their due diligence. They have to look at all that stuff too. I mean, even if they got the guy dead to rights, the defense attorney can't say, well, you better work out a deal and plead guilty. The defense attorney can't do that unless you've at least reviewed all the evidence. Because if you haven't, a lawyer could get sued for malpractice. The case could get reversed on appeal for ineffective assistance of counsel. My lawyer didn't even bother to check in to see if the evidence against me was sufficient or not. So it seems kind of funny, because we all like, again, my smartphone went off on a text message after I thought I shut it off, but they apparently come through anyways with a little reminder. With all of these convenient things, that adds an extra layer to evidence and, automatic delays in some types of cases. I don't mean a bar fight. Well, they might have a video in the bar, who knows? But a lot of times it's eyewitnesses. I saw the guy do it, sort of thing. Okay. But for some cases, and it's actually getting to be a lot of them, particularly with the body cams and the squad cams for stopping people on the road, there's all that evidence, and somebody's both sides have to look at it and make sense out of it before they can figure out what they think they might want to do, go to trial or negotiate some sort of deal or whatever. So, that's something we don't think about, but it's true. suddenly you got all this other stuff that wasn't evidence 10, 15 years ago or 25, 30 years ago. Because now, I mean, I won't want to talk about how old I am, but when I was in high school, there wasn't even any calculators, for God's sakes. There was no such thing, a handheld calculator. Okay, well, now that's nothing. Okay, you got your entire computer in your life on your smartphone that you're carrying in your pocket. So there's that. And then there are also new laws from time to time that get added, additional crimes and additional things. So that, adds to the mix. And there is this turnover, and I had mentioned the public defender's office, but also local DAs. There's been a significant turnover even in the Washington County District Attorney's office. They have 2 brand new lawyers this month. Now, they're not brand new, fresh out of law school. They're actually fairly experienced, good people, but they're used to working in a different system, sometimes in a different county. And even though the laws we all deal with are the same in every county throughout the state, because they're state laws, how that translates into the real world and what we do in a courtroom and what procedures we have, it's different from county to county. You would think, it should be the same. Just go from one county to that. And yet it isn't. It can be significantly different on how things are handled. And sometimes it's just procedure, but even legally, sometimes how things are handled. So, in Washington County, we have 2 brand new prosecutors. We have 2 brand new public, and I mean brand new within the last month or 2, public defenders. And we have some judges that are fairly new as well. And there is this learning curve for all those people. And does that cause a little bit of delay from time to time as people struggle to get up to speed? Yes, it does. So, again, I started with this idea that Brad Stern had sent me an email about is there a problem with a shortage of lawyers, and has it caused a backlog? And again, the simple answer is yes, but I thought I'd expand it and let you know about some of the other things that are out there to give you a sense. And that's pretty much all I have, because I thought that they would leave the topic. There's plenty of stuff we could talk about, but it's the state of the court system. So it's a pretty broad topic if anybody has any questions. And if you don't, I'm not offended. I always tell people that, don't feel you have to ask questions. If you're
willing, because I know there's significant public interest in bail practices right now, to maybe talk about bail practices, why we have bail, what it is and what it is not. How it's not punitive because the person hasn't been convicted yet, they're simply accused.
Sure. And bail is real controversial these days, as you know, because there's a case over in Waukesha that I'm not going to specifically comment on, where that person was let out allegedly after running over his girlfriend with his car and got let out. And then they have this horrible mess that's going on with a trial in Waukesha right now. And so bail is obviously a concern to the public. I mean, it's a concern to law enforcement, to judges. I can't imagine anybody that bail isn't a concern for. And people accused of a crime, it's a concern to them because they're hoping they can get a reasonable bail and get out because they're presumed innocent when they first get charged. Everybody's presumed innocent. So here's the basics on that. And nothing is quite this simple, but there is a state statute, and it's 969.01 that talks about eligibility for release. That's the title. They're talking about bail because the whole chapter 969 is about bail. And it's a really long-winded statute, but one of the key phrases that always comes up in court is, and I can read this one sentence. It says, bail may be imposed at or after the initial appearance only upon a finding by the court that there is a reasonable basis to believe that bail is necessary to assure appearance in court. Is bail necessary to assure appearance in court? Okay. And again, it's not that simple, but one of the main purposes of bail, and you got to understand, there is no way for a judge, unless you got a crystal ball and you can foresee the future, to know who's going to really show up for court and who ain't. Okay. And I'll do a little tangent. Years ago, a guy was, it was my case. I had a case and very, very serious. I said $50,000 cash bail. I looked at the guy, he was in the room, and it was so serious, I thought $50,000. Okay. Looked at him, you wouldn't think he had two nickels to rub together. Next thing I know is I get a note from the clerk of court's office. He posted his bail and he's gone. He took off. He left state. I don't know if he was on America's Most Wanted or whatever, but they eventually located him and brought him back. The court system ended up with $50,000. It was forfeited. But first of all, I didn't think he could come up with a couple of nickels to rub together, and looking at him and hearing his background in court, but somehow he did. And it's rare. People don't normally take off like that, but is it always a danger? It is. It was my case. I set the bail. Okay. Eventually he was back. So the problem is the judges under the statute is supposed to set a bail if there is a reasonable basis to believe that bail is necessary to assure appearance in court. Again, you'd have to be clairvoyant. You'd have to have a crystal ball to know who is going to show up and who ain't. Now, most people do show up. There are some exceptions. We get these driver's license cases where people don't have a license and they have trouble getting to court, because if they come and drive illegally, the staff people usually look out in the parking lot and they make a note of those that might drive in. And then before they leave after court, they get another operating after revocation or operating without a license type case. But that's sort of the assignment. But that assignment in terms of a judge, what do you think is reasonably necessary to assure that they're going to appear in court? It's an educated guess. Okay. But there are other considerations, and public safety is one of them. You get somebody who is extremely dangerous, and as a judge, the person is, even though they're presumed innocent. You look at the paperwork and what they're charged with and what they're accused of and how many eyewitnesses there are, or it's on video or God knows whatever. You think, well, the likelihood of this guy getting convicted, or it could be she. We have a lot of females these days who are fairly aggressive as well. And, you can take public safety into account. And it's not just because what if the guy will show up, but he's going to commit a whole bunch more crimes in the meantime, and he might threaten somebody or endanger somebody's safety. You can consider the public safety issue as well, and we do. And of course, the statute, if you read the fine print, says we can impose reasonable conditions of bail too. And reasonable conditions on a drunk driving case, obviously, are maintain absolute sobriety. And in a case where people seem to drive all the time with or without a license, we can order them, don't drive, period. I don't care whether you got a license or not. We don't do that real often, but we do. And I've done it recently. Okay, I don't care, sir, if you got a license or not. It's a condition of your bond. You are not driving a car. I'm ordering that. And if you do and you're caught, you're going to get arrested. You're going to have a new charge for bail jumping, violating the conditions of your bond. So it's really difficult. And let me back up and say one thing. And again, I don't mean to be critical of Milwaukee County. I have some good friends down there and some good people that work in the court system down there. But they, in the past, I think they've altered this recently because of some issues they've had. But they've set bail based on what they call evidence-based practices. In other words, they have some person, before the judge ever sees them and sets bail, do a little report and make a recommendation, give all sorts of background information. Well, do they have a stable residence? Do they have a job? Things that matter. Because if you have a stable job and a stable residence and you got relatives in the area, you're less likely to skip town and head for the Bahamas or something, or Mexico or whatever. And all that information is relevant and valid, but what they seemed to be doing, and I'm not an expert because I'm not down there, they seem to be relying on that very heavily. And a lot of times judges were not setting bail. They have court commissioners set bail, cases assigned to a judge, but the judges are pretty busy and the bail gets set. And then but occasionally something bad happens. Okay. And we're not immune in Washington County. I don't want to make it sound like I'm picking on Milwaukee, but they have much higher volume. They have many more cases. And occasionally that means they have significant problems that come up. But, it's difficult. We rely on all the things we're supposed to rely on setting bail in Washington County. But I do think that, common sense and experience help you too. I mean, you get a look at that person in court and you ask them a couple of questions, and you can not know for sure, but that interaction and seeing them up close can also help you sometimes get a gut reaction. Well, is this guy on the level? Is he going to be okay or isn't he? And that can affect how you set bail too. It's subjective, and you got to have a reasonable basis, okay, to believe that, cash bail is necessary. But, have I ever set bail that was too high or too low? Yes, I have. I mean, it's going to happen over time. Fortunately, knock on wood, I haven't had any of those real horror stories like the one they have going on in Waukesha. And if you remember back, and if you got a good memory, there was a Dr. Benson who had an OWI case and was allowed out on bail, even though he was convicted. He had been convicted. I can't remember if it was a third offense OWI or something. And he was going to jail. It was mandatory. But he asked for some additional time to get his affairs in order before he would report for his jail sentence. And before he was actually be sentenced even. I can't remember. It was one or the other. But anyway, he was let out and he killed a pregnant woman driving drunk. Okay, I think it was driving drunk, and that goes back quite a ways if your memory goes back that far. So that case resulted in a change in the state law. Incidentally, in operating under the influence cases, once a person is actually convicted and pleads guilty on at least a third offense, not a first or second, but a third offense, their state law says, it's right in the chapter on bail, that there is no bail. They're remanded into custody until they're sentenced because they have a mandatory, jail sentence at that. So that case was so horrific that they changed the state law. Okay, which is a help. It's not perfect, doesn't solve all of our problems, but I don't know if that helps. But we're required to set reasonable bail. I mean, there are exceptions. A first degree intentional homicide, you don't have to give anybody any bail. It's the judge's decision. But if you look at the cases on first degree intentional homicide, sometimes there's no bail and sometimes it's 500,000 or $1 million, and as far as I know, nobody's able to post that kind of money. And the other thing I should say about bail is, this shows how old I am. Many years ago, we had bail bondsmen and a law that said that they could post 10% through a bail bondsman. Again, you got to be a little older to remember that. Wisconsin got rid of that. There are some states that still have, you can watch, I think on, who's that guy? The bounty hunter guy, I'm not trying to advertise for him either, but some states still have that where these bail bonds people will basically act like an insurance company and guarantee the full amount of money, but only 10% will be posted. And then if the guy takes off, the bounty hunter goes looking for him and usually finds him. But that's what that's about. We don't have that in Wisconsin. We used to years ago. If you want to think back, we used to when I was younger. And I think that was a wise decision. I'm not trying to get into politics. I don't have much to do with the state legislature unless they can help the court system a little bit. So there are those wrinkles to bail too.
So in Wisconsin, if bail is, say, $20,000, they have to post the full
20, yes, the full cash. Now, again, there's always a little wrinkle to everything in the law, because you'd like to say, well, these rules are absolute. There are occasions, it's somewhat rare, where a family will say, we don't have cash, but we'll put up our home. Okay, that has to be approved by a judge. And I mean, that happens once in a blue moon. But does it ever happen where they come to court with a proposal and say, you know, we don't have the cash money, we got a lot of equity in our home, we'll put up our home as security. I can't even think of a case in the last 10 years, okay? But has it ever happened? Yes, you know, so there's that too.
And then you mentioned from a public safety perspective with that if there's that in a complaint that there's factors that show a likelihood that the person's a danger, you set higher bail.
Yes.
Along the same lines, do you look at past criminal record?
Yes.
Past offenses for bail jumping, as you said?
Yes, we look at all that stuff. And in doing that, sometimes the information is less than perfect, okay? Because imagine a guy just got arrested yesterday. I'm on intake court, so at 3:30 today, I'm setting bail, okay? So a public open courtroom, somebody wants to come, they can see, you know, like my bail, too high, too low, I'll do the best I can. But some guy gets arrested last night for something. He's probably in court today at 3:30 to make his first court appearance, called an initial appearance, where a criminal complaint's filed against him, and we go through all of his rights and all that stuff, and we have to set bail, okay? But the judge doesn't know till 2:30, 3 o'clock, sometimes 3:30, that case is even coming into court, because it's sitting in the DA's office and they're working on it and they're trying to, you know, finish all the paperwork. So there's nothing I can do until I walk in the room. Sometimes I got a little time to review the paperwork ahead of time, sometimes not. And we have to rely on the lawyers. So there's a prosecutor there. Prosecutor usually has information on prior record, which you're asking, can we consider this? Yes. I mean, it's sort of common sense, but every case is different. Somebody's got a record as long as my arm, and it's a recent record, they keep getting into trouble, their bail is going to probably be higher. Okay. Again, every case is different, but it's probably going to be higher if they, you know, keep getting into trouble right and left, and have got all these on their record. These are all convictions that are on their record, and the judge can, and sometimes they have information on pending cases in other counties, and we can consider that as well. And but we're relying on the prosecutor, and sometimes they have information out of state, and the information out of state is not always real accurate and succinct, because their ability to get that information is limited. They can get it, but to get it fast and accurate, it's a little iffy. So when we talk about things from out of state, sometimes we get an argument because they got something about some case in another state, but the defense attorney and the person who's accused, they'll say, well, no, that's not him. It's another guy with the same name. Okay. And I've had cases of mistaken identity, same name. Okay. I've had that happen. Okay, it does. If you got a common name and you got somebody with the same name in another state getting into trouble, this could happen to any of us. And suddenly you get stopped for speeding and they think you're some, you know, horrible criminal. Well, it's rare, but it does happen. Okay, you know, it does. I had a case recently where this poor woman was, you know, claimed she had this horrible record, and her lawyer managed to get all sorts of documentation. I mean, everything under the sun you can think of, and convince the DA that no, that wasn't her. Okay. Oops. But we can consider all that, and we do. But we're relying on imperfect information, and we're having to make that decision very quick. Now, I should say this. When a judge sets bail, that amount is not necessarily set in stone, because we're doing it early on, pretty quick. We got limited information. It can be raised or lowered later on if there's a good reason for it to be. Okay. Again, you got the wrong person. This person didn't do all this stuff. Well, maybe they're not quite as big a risk as I thought they were when I first heard this case. Or you know, the DA comes in and he finds out there's other serious problems, and they're going to issue a whole bunch of additional charges, and they think this guy's a flight risk. You know, they can come in and say, Judge, we're asking you to increase bail. Okay. Judge may or may not agree, but it, you know, when we set bail, and I've had cases like this where it's set, pretty darn high. And the guy's sitting there for months and months, for good reason, because he can't make bail, the family can't make bail. And yet his case is going to be, and this is true. Let me give you an example that will make sense to, I think, just about everyone. Again, we have so many drug problems these days. Okay. We get cases where we have significant cash bail set. And it could be a couple of weeks, could be a month, 2 months later. Families got them in a rehab program with a guaranteed spot, a bed in a facility, but they can't make the bail, and they can't get that kid. It's their adult kid usually, can't get them there. So they come in and they make a pitch, judge, can you reduce the bail so that he can get in treatment? And treatment is probably a good thing. If you look at the case, you see what's going on. So do we occasionally reduce bail for that reason? We put a condition on there. It's subject to, you're going to be in that program. You're going to be there, and you're not going to be at any other location. It'll be right in the bond conditions, a condition that you do participate in that program. And that's your address, and you don't go anywhere else. Unless the courts advise. I mean, if they finish the program and they get out, they're, at some point they'll probably kick them out. The bed's probably only good for so many days. But things like that can happen. Sort of common sense stuff where you think to yourself, well, is that a good risk? It's still a risk. I mean, the guy might, break out of the facility if it's locked, or if it's unlocked, he might just walk out the door. And I always say he, because we have more he's than she's, but I don't want to slight women, because we do get a fair number of women with all sorts of problems, including drug problems. So there's that type of situation. Bail isn't necessarily set in stone. Things can happen that would change your mind.
You mentioned Milwaukee County has this evidence-based practice tool that they use.
Yes.
I'm a nurse, that's the world I live in. Do you have a name on that? I'm just curious.
I don't know that they have a fancy name beyond it, but they do. They keep track of all sorts of statistics. I mean, it's a genuine effort to, because, to look at, who shows up and who doesn't based on past history, but every person is a different person. Again, we're trying to set bail and trying to figure out, is this person going to really show up for court? Are they going to stay out of trouble or not? And it's guesswork. We try to make it educated guesswork, but they have gone a step further because they've done some studies, and I don't know all the details, but about 5 years ago, or maybe it was a little longer, this whole concept of evidence-based practices came out and got sort of popular, that, geez, you could keep statistics and figure everything out. And, and they don't go this far, but suggesting maybe we don't even need a judge. We can put all this information in a computer. They don't say that. But the suggestion is, hey, we got all this information on a computer. We can tell you, judge, whether this person should be let out on bail or not. And I do think, and that's an exaggeration to make the point on what is evidence-based practices. It's based on evidence, historical data, and trying to predict the future for different people based on that. And there's some value to it, but it's got its limits, just like everything else we're trying to do. It's
your intuition.
Yeah, if you do this stuff enough, instincts are not a bad thing. I tell this to people in all sorts of situations. It's kind of like if you get an email saying you won the lottery in a foreign country, but you need to pay the taxes in advance before we can send you this check for a couple $1 million. Your intuition should tell you there's something wrong with this deal, but it doesn't tell everyone that. There are people that get caught up in other schemes that are a little more sophisticated than that one. And, but I always tell people, if your intuition tells you there's something wrong, boy, trust your intuition. There probably is something wrong. So experience and intuition can be helpful in that, being able to see people. Now we have a little issue with seeing people because Those of you that pay close attention to the court system knows that on these first appearances with people arrested, we do a lot of that from the jail by video conferencing. And video conferencing is excellent, and the sheriff's department likes it for a whole bunch of reasons, including additional safety. They're not removing somebody from the jail and bringing them in shackles into a courtroom with a whole bunch of other people where they're, either they might get rowdy or family members in the audience might get rowdy, or a victim of a crime might get upset and the person's in there and it's right after it happened because you're setting bail the first time around. So we're doing a lot of this by video, and it is efficient and it is safer to some extent, but it also, you can't get quite as good a look and a good sense of people as you can as if they're in the courtroom. And they've been really busy with their video system this week. And for some reason, they've all been coming into my courtroom in person. And I've remarked to a few people that it is a little better for the judge if they're right there. Security doesn't necessarily agree that it's better for their job and what they have to do,
Yeah, like telemedicine and healthcare.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
You gotta, whatever, be in there,
So-
like, tell some-
So it's a trade-off. We got all,
You gotta pull back the covers, touch and look. And
Yep. Yeah, we have all this technology, and the question is, we have to be smart in how we use it. I mean, I can use technology for the things I have to, but I'm not on, and I don't think judges should be, but some are, on Facebook or all this other stuff. There are dangers for judges to get involved in that sort of stuff. So I don't. Yes.
Sorry, you mentioned, I'm sorry.
No.
That two individuals recently went to Fond du Lac County.
Yes.
Have the rationales for the change?
I haven't personally, I think I know, but it's an educated guess. They may have different reasons. But they were both in private practice as lawyers, so they could take public defender appointments, and they did very well at it. And that's just part of the shortage issue on attorneys to handle those people that can't afford a lawyer but are entitled to one under the Constitution. But they both went to the Fond du Lac County DA's office almost at the exact same time. But being a prosecutor is not the worst job in the world if you think about it. First of all, you get a regular paycheck. You're not in private practice trying to struggle, and you don't have to deal with unruly clients or people who have unreasonable expectations. Think you can solve every problem for them. You can't solve everything. There are good benefits, regular hours for the most part, and you can make a career on that, and the salary's pretty darn good. And it's, generally speaking, sort of a respected job. And, you compare that to working in the public defender's office. And it's, you can say you're wearing the white hat. You're on the side of, truth, justice, and the American way and all that sort of stuff. But I don't mean to belittle public defenders. They have a very tough job, and they're doing an honorable job. I mean, they have to represent these people. They're entitled to a lawyer, So I think it was a career choices,
Did we have anything here for them?
I don't know the exact timing because we had a couple of openings in the Washington County DA's office at roughly the same time, but I don't know that it was exactly the same time because we've just hired, not we, the DA's office recently hired 2 people as well. But they went to Fond du Lac, and they're gone. And they I think between the 2 of them, because I saw this in an email, they were handling approximately 70 cases on public defender appointments where the public defender couldn't handle it. And suddenly they had those 70 cases back. And again, this is within the last couple of months. And I didn't say this before, but it's, I meant to. Sometimes when they're having trouble getting somebody to take a case, they can't handle it internally with their staff attorneys, and they're trying to get appointments. Every once in a while, because it seems to be taking a long time, we'll get an email that advising us of how many contacts and phone calls they've made to try to get somebody who will agree to take the public defender appointed cases. And sometimes it's 100 and 135, 140 attempts to get somebody and they still don't have somebody willing to take the case. That's a little scary. But again, their backlog isn't too bad right now, because I was just told their backlog, and this was in an email maybe last Friday or so, from the public defender, that they have about 20 cases they're searching for right now. And 10 of those people are currently in the county jail, can't make bail, but they don't have a lawyer to even talk to, which probably doesn't make them happy if you think about it.
Yeah, I was, curious how we could have maybe kept them here or hired them.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, I don't know the dynamics of all of that. They might have had other reasons, family or something. I'm not aware of that, but where they wanted to move to a different county, or they were tired of this county. I mean, I'm kidding. I don't know why we would be tired of Washington County, but but that did happen. I guess I would ask Mark Benson, the DA, and maybe they didn't even apply here. I mean, he can't hire them if they don't apply.
Why did they consider us, something to learn from?
Don't know. I will say this, as far as I can tell, it's early returns, but the two people that were hired in the Washington County DA's office seem to be very good. They both have experience. They're not fresh out of law school. In comparison, the two people hired by the public defender's office are both fresh out of law school. Okay. And they struggled for months and months to find somebody. But the good news is they're here, and they seem to be good people that are bright. With a learning curve, so be it.
Supervisor Schleif?
I have two questions, so I'll take the quick one first. I think.
Sure.
You mentioned way early that some traffic cases go into court.
True.
Pays the cost of that.
Well, in a general sense, we all do. Because the court system is funded through the state legislature and through Madison. But every case that gets filed, criminal, not criminal, civil, there's filing fees. You want to sue somebody in small claims court, well, you got to pay a filing fee. You got to serve the papers and all that. Okay, and that money goes somewhere. I'll tell you where in a minute. It doesn't necessarily go to the courts. And you get a speeding ticket, and the base amount is $10, but the total cost on your ticket is like $347 or something, but it's a $10 ticket. All the rest of that is add-ons for court costs and surcharges and a whole list of things that there are state laws that say that all has to be added on. And one part of those added on costs is what they call court costs. Okay. Now, my understanding, and I'm not an expert on this, but my understanding is all that money goes to the federal, the state government, into the general fund, including the court cost proportion. If I'm wrong, somebody out there can correct me, but that's my understanding. Even though it's labeled as court costs, it goes into the general fund and disappears. And then the state legislature sets a budget for the court system maybe it's every 2 years. I think they don't have a yearly budget, but if somebody in a criminal case gets a fine, and there's mandatory fines in every criminal case. I'm talking about, fairly small amount, $500-600 typically. I'm not talking about the guy who's rich and embezzles a lot of money and might get a $10,000 or $20,000 or $30,000 fine. Those cases are extremely rare because the rain, this is but that money does disappear somewhere, but it doesn't stay right here. It just, and I could talk more about that, but maybe it wouldn't be wise. Again, that's my understanding. It goes somewhere, and I'm hoping that the state legislature uses it for good purposes, and they do funnel a lot back to the court system. The court system is expensive, okay, to run. It is.
So my second question, Rich, because this might get longer. You said you have 2 new judges, and every job is a learning experience, and not to criticize any judges, I wouldn't do that, but what's the oversight system for judges?
Well, there's a number of things. Well, first of all, and the average person doesn't know this, but judges do. Any judge who gets sworn in as a brand new judge, there is a mandatory mentoring period. They're sworn in, and in theory, they could sit on the bench and start hearing cases. Actually, they cannot. Okay, they're required to go through mandatory mentoring that involves I'll give you just a hint of the overview. It's kind of what you'd think. Well, if you're going to be mentored, what do you got to do? Well, first of all, you deal with the presiding judge, which happens to be me, because all these other people are pretty new in this county, and I'm responsible, along with some other people in this judicial district, to set up literally a calendar of where they're going to be, what day, and what sort of training and experience they're going to get. I mean, it's everything from the people that run the state computers, call them CCAP people, come in, train them how to use the computers, to working with the judges in this county, to also being sent to other counties and basically observing, because what they do in other counties, because as I said earlier, not every county does everything exactly the same. And it is interesting to get around and see what's happening in other counties. And so there is this mandatory mentoring process before they take the bench. And even when that's completed and it's mandatory, I mean, 8 hours a day for the first 2 weeks, okay? Cannot handle a case, can't do anything because you're involved in this mandatory mentoring process. That's 2 weeks, but it doesn't necessarily end there. But that's the 2 weeks before they gradually kind of work themselves into their job. And, they're supposed to continue to consult with the presiding judge in their county, which right now happens to be me, and other things. And I should say this, we all do consult behind the scenes. It's kind of interesting, but there are ethical rules for judges. We can't ask for legal advice if we have a difficult problem, we want a second opinion. We can't ask, like, for example, a lawyer, even if it's a lawyer not involved in the case. There's an ethical rule, but the ethical rule says we can consult with other judges, thank God. Because if if you're brand new and you come up with something you never heard of before, at least you can talk to other judges in this county, or there are listservs, just like there are for a lot of groups. You can send out an email saying, hey, this is what I got today. Does anybody ever run into this? How are you going to handle this? And other judges in the whole state will actually, some of them will chime in and do that. And, at some point they're sort of kind of turned loose. That doesn't mean we don't consult. I mean, we meet regularly and we talk more often than we meet as judges in this county to talk about what's going on. And we do that. Matter of fact, I chatted with the judges before this because I asked them individually, what do you think? Is there really a shortage of attorneys in the county? I mean, there is, and do you think it's causing a backlog? Do you think other problems? And then I got all sorts of statistical information, all sorts of data and stuff from those sort of people that keep track of statistics and do that. So that's how I was able to give you some hard numbers on a few things. Oh, and I think, did I give you the number? This was what I meant to give you. So I'm going to go off topic for just a second, because remember I talked about how bad the OWI cases are and how, 3 to 4 months, but get a test result on ethanol, alcohol, and then another 11 months after that to get a test result on drugs. Somewhere I have it, and I want to give you the exact number because I have it. I think I remember it, but I don't want to. Currently, I mean, this is as of last Friday, in Washington County, we have 244 OWI cases pending. And each of those 244, well, there might be 1 or 2 exceptions, but almost all of them have an automatic backlog of 3 or 4 months. And if they're drug cases, over a year. And that's right now as of last Friday. Okay.
So that backlog, the responsibility for that is the state attorney general, correct?
I'm trying to stay away from the political issues because judges are supposed to be completely impartial. But certainly the attorney general has, can set that as a priority and work on those sort of things. I still think ultimately it comes down to money, though, because if you want to get better equipment or hire more analysts, you got to have the money. It's one thing to say that there's the Attorney General for the state is the chief law enforcement officer for the state, and that's true. But it's like me in my courtroom. I can't wave a magic wand on some things and fix them and make there be no drug cases. Okay. If I could, I'd wave that magic wand. I can't. So I don't think I think it's a question of money ultimately, I think. And, enough qualified people, that will do the job. And sometimes, getting faster, better equipment or something. I'm not a techie person at the state lab, so I'm familiar with the type of equipment they use, but they're always improving everything. I don't know. So, but that's a problem. And if anybody is willing to talk to state legislatures and you really want to fix the problems, and I'm talking about one county, 244 cases. Okay. I'm not talking about the whole state, but all of those cases in this county are delayed because we're waiting. There are one or two exceptions. Sometimes people come in and they just want to plead guilty and they say, and this is rare, but they say, I don't need to wait for that blood test result. I know I'm guilty. So some of those will resolve earlier, but not many. Almost everybody waits and thinks, well, maybe that test result will come back low and I wasn't right. I don't think I had that much to drink. You get a lot of that. So, and again, that's one county. But if the state legislature wanted to, earmark additional funds for the state lab, I would not be upset. It's a problem.
Thank you for making this presentation today too. I apologize, I arrived late, so if my questions are repetitive, I apologize. But I walked in during you talking about the serious nature of some of the charges that are majority of your cases. And I was wondering if it's even possible to break it down, but that increase, is that due mostly just to society making those choices, or is also other components I think that may or may not affect our laws becoming tougher or new laws, or is it also a decision to just prosecute more?
Again, you're going to get a qualified answer because I think it's not just one thing. Just like we say, well, is there a backlog in the court system? I can't say it's just the public defenders appointed cases. No, there's COVID. There's this technology and all this other stuff. I mean, it tends to be a lot of things, but I don't have a complete breakdown of all of the cases.
I would even say just to use
yeah, I mean, I can tell you anecdotally, again, and I'll go back to something I said earlier. When I first started as a judge in 2007, for me to get a serious drug case was really unusual. It's like, oh my God, I got a heroin case. I haven't seen one of those in a long time. Now it's almost like we're no longer affected. We're not that we're immune to it, not that we don't care about it, but there are heroin cases, there are overdose cases, Narcan being used and people being dragged back from, being dead. And it is a slight exaggeration because some days I'm doing other things, but there's sort of an all day, every day type of occurrence. And I do think, again, this is just my impression without absolute statistics on this, but, the drug usage and addiction has created a lot of this increase, I think. Okay. I don't have the statistics to back me up on that one, but, and again, people think, well, if it's drug cases, it's got to mean somebody possessing drugs or somebody trying to deliver drugs. No. We see a lot of cases where people they're in court on a new case, but there's nothing in the paperwork that says they're charged with possessing drugs, but they get arrested and they tell the police that the reason they're stealing is because they're trying to feed a drug habit. So they're charged with theft or, shoplifting or something, and problems within families too. And this is a fairly common scenario. adult children have a drug problem and the parents take them back into the house to try to help them, and they start stealing from the parents, both property in the house, stealing a debit card or, and running up bills on it, or they're going out and they come back and they're under the influence and they're acting out real bad and they're threatening their parents. I mean, this stuff happens and it's not that unusual. So my guess, but put that down as a guess, is I think a lot of it has to do with how easy it is to get illegal drugs these days and how cheap some of it is as well.
Two more questions, one short, one long. And I don't know if you touched on this one either, but evictions. Can you touch on how those were affected through COVID and where they stand today? Was there ever a moratorium?
There were moratoriums, yes, and they were federal imposed moratoriums, and they certainly affected us in Washington County and the state. They're all gone. There aren't any more moratoriums. If you're a landlord or a tenant, there are no moratoriums anymore. But for a while, did that cause some delays? It did. Yes, you're right. So if we wanted to put a list of where there's some things that caused, that was a temporary backlog, but all of those have gone away. Fortunately, that at least COVID issues there, I'm no expert, and boy, still trying to learn how to use my smartphone. I noticed how quick I managed to silence it though. We all, have different levels of concern over COVID. And when it was first a real serious problem, people used to ask me, well, how's it affecting the court system? And I would tell them this, I'd say, look, you got to understand, I am working with people who think it's completely made up and bogus. There is no issue. And I'm working with other people that would wear a hazmat suit to court if they thought they could get away with it and they had one. Okay. Everybody's got a different attitude towards COVID. And I, as a judge, have to try to respect everybody's safety concerns, whether they think it's baloney or it's still a serious problem. But it's not significantly affecting the court system in Washington County anymore. We're back to normal in-person stuff for most things. We still use Zoom. I don't mean to suggest we don't. And we use the video for the jail people because of some safety issues and other things. But fortunately, we seem to have gotten past that. And I don't think it is causing us any problems with any backlog anymore.
I think because there was a very distinct difference between counties of how long maybe that moratorium would seem.
Oh, yeah.
And,
absolutely. It was short with, no, well, the moratorium, that was federally imposed. And now I can't speak for individual judges who wanted to be sympathetic to people during COVID, because the judges have a certain amount of discretion on a lot of things. Some things you don't. Sometimes you just, this is the law. This is what you're going to get. Okay. I mean, possession of child porn, there's a mandatory minimum 3 years prison. Doesn't matter who you are, what your circumstances are, good or bad. It's a mandatory minimum 3 years. I can't change that. That's the state law. Okay. But in a lot of things, judges might say, well, yeah, okay, you did, Mr. Landlord, you did all your paperwork correctly, and you would be entitled to evict this person, but I'm going to give them a break. I'm going to give a delay. Let's come back in a couple of weeks and delay it anyways. And there's nothing, but I mean, we're back to doing it, there are no more moratoriums. I'm not really aware of other counties doing it differently, because again, we were told that's,
maybe it was more in how the discretion of the judges were.
yeah, and that could be. I mean, you go back to bail, there's discretion. What is the correct amount of bail? Well, you can't look it up on a computer or in a little book with a chart that says one size fits all, that if this is the charge, the bail should be so many dollars and so many cents, period. And again, you get somebody with a real long record and it's recent, they keep getting into trouble, their bail's going to be higher. You get somebody who's never been in trouble a day in their life, and now they have the first time in court, that's going to matter. It's probably going to affect the judge's calculation on what is appropriate bail for that person. How big a risk really are they? You know, yeah, they did something stupid and maybe illegal, but you know, discretion. And that's of course where the public doesn't like our discretion sometimes, but we do the best we can anyways. And you have to have kind of a thick skin and just say, look, I'm going to do the best I can.
Last question, and it's a quick one. It might be trivial, but it won't be trivial. A rule that I've been told of the Washington courts by the, not the bailiffs, but the security at the entrances is you're not allowed to bring a water bottle to the courts. Could you comment the purpose or reason of that?
I
Or water
am,
bottles,
yeah, I'm not aware of that.
I can't take the water bottle past this.
Oh. Well, it might, in a roundabout way. Now, security, you understand, we have security, metal detectors and all that stuff as you come into the building, and it's a good thing we do in this world we live in. And they, you know, if you see their reports, they do collect knives and things, you know, that really shouldn't be in a courtroom.
They're nice. They offer to let you return it to your vehicle.
Yeah, I don't know if they're worried what might be in there. The water bottle that might not be water. We'd have to ask Sergeant Hennis, because I don't set those rules.
Told me that it
for
was
them.
a Rule created by the judges for their.
Yeah. Well, I'm drawing a blank. I'm sorry. You know, I'll ask Hennis.
I know it's a money issue too, but,
Yeah,
I have not-
yeah. You understand, we do have water in the courts. If people get thirsty, we have those, you know, those cooler things. And, you know, we're not going to make anybody die of thirst in the courtroom. So.
Go over to, let's go to Supervisor Conrad and then Supervisor Tony.
Regarding the lab turnaround times, say if we, just say hypothetically, if we had our own lab, or do we have to send those test results to the state, or can we send it to, you know, a private lab? Or is there like a surrounding state that maybe their backlog isn't as high? You know, the turnaround, you know,
Well,
they have to go to the state.
well, first of all, it has to be a certified approved lab. There are national organizations, because again, if it's, you know, if somebody had a degree in chemistry and wanted to help out and do it in their basement, you know, that wouldn't be allowed in court. I mean, even if they could do it correctly, you know, so everything has to be approved, and there are state laws that say so. So it generally goes to our state lab. I'm aware of some instances where they have farmed stuff out to other labs out of state and have done that. You know, it's, you know, there's something called chain of custody of evidence. And you have to be a little careful on how you do that, because otherwise there might be an argument of, well, what they tested in Ohio, how do we know that wasn't tampered with, or if that's what we collect, you know, that was collected from me as the accused person in here in Wisconsin. I mean, you know, there are potential issues with that. And then, of course, if those people have to testify because there's a trial, you know, you're going to get somebody from Ohio back here to testify, and how much it's going to cost. Again, I know that they've done some of that. I think they've tried to limit it. But it is the state lab, and they are located in Madison. And again, you know, I've dealt with a number of their people. They're fine people. They seem to be hardworking and very knowledgeable. I see them testify in court, but and they are testing. I can't give you any statistics, but I know per day it's thousands and thousands of samples. I mean, there's just so much stuff that they get requests for. So it's a problem. I mean, I think they would tell you it's a problem. State lab people, it's yeah, we're backlogged. Sorry, it's now taken 11 months on some of this stuff. Oh my God, you know, it's a problem. And in my own simplistic way of looking at it, I think it's about money. Because if you double the size of the building and double the staff, I think they could do things quicker. Again, that's a very simplistic approach to life. I'm sure there's more involved than that. Okay. you know, they're struggling, and the delay has gotten longer recently, not shorter. And I know that because I'm hearing it in the room I'm sitting there from people that are, you know, who are calling the state lab and asking how long it's going to be. It's secondhand information, but it's pretty darn accurate.
Is there, I just wondering cost wise, just say hypothetically, we set up our own lab. Would there be essentially a cost savings or return on the investment? Would that increase time or not really?
First of all, I don't know if it's legally possible, and I'm not an expert on that, to set up your own lab like Washington County. It probably would be pretty expensive too, because you'd have to have,
Labs are expensive,
yeah,
accreditation
you know, and then you got to go through all the accreditation and everything. And I've sometimes wondered why they didn't have another branch of the state lab somewhere else in the state. And maybe it's, you know, economies of scale, you just can't, you know, it's not effective because you got, you know, you got to have all these special lockers that you lock everything, and certain things have to be kept cool, and, you know, refrigerated samples that might deteriorate. And, you know, there's just tons, and the equipment they use, I'm sure is extremely expensive. And it's got to be checked regularly. You know, they got to come through, and everything gets checked every time you turn around. So I don't really, my gut says it probably wouldn't. I don't know that you could set up a local lab.
Or just even, you know, does that delay, would there be a cost savings somehow to the county if that delay wasn't as long?
Well, I mean, you know, I think the cost savings is, it would be, things would happen quicker. Okay, but I don't know how you translate that into money. Yes, we would be better at getting those cases done. Again, right now, there are 244 Washington County cases. I don't know that that would justify the cost of a lab and a full-time analyst and probably 2 or 3 people or whatever. And the savings wouldn't be that you'd get a refund in money. It's just that the courts could maybe move quicker. But it would be, to me, it sounds like, I hadn't thought about this before, sounds like we would be taking on extra expense with no way to recoup the money except through, God forbid, tax dollars.
I was just curious, but you know, just decreasing that time in and itself.
We do need to decrease the time. You are absolutely right. It's ridiculous that these cases, and you understand, if it takes 3 or 4 months to get just a simple alcohol test result, that means they finally have the result. That doesn't mean the case is taken care of that day, either by some sort of plea agreement or a trial that day. No, then they want an adjournment to study the results, the lawyers talk together, negotiate, see if they can come to a settlement. It'll take a month or 2. And then maybe the guy's still thinking about it or whatever, or if it gets set for a trial, that's months later. So those cases aren't, you know, when I talk about a 3 or 4 month delay to get the test results, or after that, an additional 11 months to get a drug test result, that doesn't mean the case is done then. It's still in the system for a while. You know, that's a problem. And but it's, you know, it's not just Washington County, it's the whole state.
Thank you. Sorry.
Who appoints the cases that you hear? Is it based off your workload?
Well, you know, it's sort of, I got to explain this a little bit. It's sort of done at random, because we don't get to pick our cases and say, well, that one sounds interesting, I think I'll take that case. No, for all the civil cases, and those are assigned at random. And this is in the old days when I was a lawyer, if you were worried that one particular judge you thought should not handle a certain type of case, and you were filing 4 cases, you would have 4 right there in front and say, if I hand you this one, you'd ask the clerk, who is this one going to be assigned to? And then this one and this one. And if you had a really difficult case and you thought somebody, you know, but that doesn't happen anymore because it's all filed electronically. Okay. And so it's basically done at random. The exception is the criminal cases, because the way we've set up the system, all judges in Washington County handle all types of cases. And there's a whole bunch of reasons. That would be a tangent. I'm more than willing to talk about it. But, and because not every county does it that way. Sometimes some counties specialize certain types of cases. It can cause a whole bunch of problems. But we, all 4 judges handle all types of cases. So civil cases, if somebody walked in, e-filed 4 civil cases, all at once, click, 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 each of the judges would end up with one of those civil cases because it's done at random. It's just, and it's just kind of a rotating system that way. But on the criminal cases, because you have to work on those immediately, they just got arrested yesterday. They're just in court today. You're setting bail. We have an intake system where each judge does a month at a time. We have 4 judges. There's 12 months in a year. So 3 times 4 is 12. So 3 months out of the year, I'm on intake duty. I have, and we've got branches are numbered 1, 2, 3, and 4. Branch 1 has January of every year. I'm branch 2. I have February of every year. Then comes branch 3 and branch 4. And when a judge is either elected or appointed, it's to a particular branch, numbered 1, 2, 3, or 4. So I'm a branch 2. Every year I have the months of February, June, and October. That's why it's October now, and while I'm in intake and I'm setting bail and doing all this stuff. So you want to come at 3:30? I'll be setting bail and handling new cases. And that's how we do it. So that's the criminal cases. It's sort of luck of the draw, whatever month you have, depending on what cases come through the system, the judge gets those criminal cases. And we've decided that that's the most efficient and best way to handle the criminal cases, because somebody does have to be on duty. And I'm also talking 24/7 to take search warrant calls at 3 o'clock in the morning. Whoever's on duty that month, because it's their month, gets those calls at 3 o'clock in the morning, bar closing time, when somebody is drunk and refuses to take a test. So you need a search warrant to be able to draw blood, because a search of their blood going inside your body is, according to the U.S. Supreme Court anyways, is a search. So you need a search warrant. So that's how we do it. But and can that lead to, a particular, the entire court system is sort of cyclical. There are busy months, there are less busy months. And I like to think in the month of February, people stay home more and they don't go out and drink as much and they don't get into as many bar fights and other problems. That's not always true, but sometimes true. And if you get around the holidays and the summer months, everybody's out and about. And is there more trouble and more cases in the summer months? Yeah. But everybody's kind of the 4 judges, everybody's sort of has a summer month anyways. So it over time it evens out. But in any given month, could it be a little unequal? Yeah, it could. And of course, in Wisconsin, and this is true in civil cases and civil cases, state law says if you don't like the judge, you have an absolute right to substitute the judge one time. You don't have to give a reason. Federal court, you got to give a really good reason. It's almost impossible. But state court, the state law says, if you want a different judge, somebody that I sentenced 10 years ago might not have been happy if I sent them away. Now they got a new case, it's 10 years later, and it's my month and the case is signed to me and they want a different judge. They can file a substitution request. It's a 1-page piece of paper. They get a different judge. I'm not offended. I'm fine with that. I view it as it's one less case I have to handle. That's actually a good thing. And again, it evens out over time. And that's the law. So I don't know if that answers your question, but we pretty much all handle everything, which I think is extremely good. And that variety and responsibility for everything keeps you in the loop on everything and aware of what's going on, instead of just doing divorce cases or, just doing serious felonies and, whatever. We see it all. And I think I can speak for all judges. We like it that way, the variety and the different challenges.
So heads up for everybody. So last Friday was the WCA steering committee meeting for traditional and public safety issues. Supervisor Toma and myself are on that committee. And one of the things they discussed is for the next legislative session, which will start in January, there will be a proposal to increase when they contract out for a public defender. The proposal will be $100 an hour, or for time in court, $125. Now, that would have to get passed by the legislature, signed by the governor. It could be amended through that process, but at least that proposal is being brought up. So that kind of relates to what you talked about with contracting out to public defenders and $70 not being
Yeah,
enough.
for some people, it doesn't cover overhead. I mean, I just, and again, if you think about it, as I'm repeating myself, but it isn't necessarily the most attractive work for some people. Some might say, I don't know if I want to do that sort of stuff. But that might help, I think it would help, because, money matters to people. I mean, it does.
We all get a job to support our families, so that includes attorneys, so.
Yeah.
Other quick note, everybody on the committee is always welcome to be there for intake court at 3:30 or any other open court session that's open to the general public, to see our court system in action.
Yeah, and most things we do, it is a public open courtroom. There are a few exceptions. Juvenile cases are confidential, and so public isn't allowed to sit on those. And there are a few other things that come up that sometimes are confidential. But, for the most part, you could wander in any day and you can come right in.
Any other questions for Judge Muehlbauer?
Thank you. And I need to get to work to a 10 o'clock meeting.
Okay, all right. So that sounds like a good hint that it's a good time to.
All right.
Unless you have anything else.
No. Thank you for listening, and to the extent that is possible to help the court system. And I will say this. The courts have a very good working relationship with the county, and I mean the county executive and in the county board in this county. That is not true of every county. Okay, it isn't. I won't name names of other counties. I've done too much of that already. I'm going to get nasty emails or letters on that because I'm picking on Milwaukee County or something, but I'm not. They have some really good people there. But we do have a very good working relationship. It is, it's funny if you stop and think about it, because it's sort of a hybrid system, because what we have is the county courthouse owned by the county, staffed primarily with people who are county employees, working through the clerk of court's office, judicial assistants, things like that. And then it's still a state court system with judges who are paid by the state and court reporters who are state employees. So it's this mix. And if, it is really important if we can work together to do that, because we've got state interests and we've got county interests, and it all relates together. Both, in terms of our interest and wanting to take care of everything that needs to be taken care of, and financially too, because, clerk of court's office budget comes to the county board. I'm not involved in that. I stay out of that. But do they need money to help us run the court systems? Yes, they do. And yet we've got some state employees, and technically it's a state court system. And it's funny, some of the equipment we have in the room, we've got state computers, right? Okay. And we've got other state equipment, and yet some of the equipment in the county in the court is county equipment. So we've got this blend. It's kind of an interesting hybrid, and it seems to work. So I'm glad it does. But that's all I have. Thank you.
Very much.
All right, we appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate you.
And sorry about the interruptions. I silenced my phone and it still didn't work.
That's
So
okay. So our next meeting right now is scheduled for November 16th at 7:30. And with that, I will pronounce us adjourned.